In case you're not yet 100% clear on what static websites are, let's take a few moments to talk about how they work and what makes them useful. First off, when we say static, we mean that your site is made up of nothing more than a file system. HTML, image, video, or PDF files can be requested and loaded in a user's browser, but they can't contain code for calling dynamic server-side resources like databases. So forget about building a WordPress site on file storage platforms like Amazon S3. However, static sites can still provide some dynamic behavior by offloading the processing to the client's browser, for video viewing as an example, or to some third-party service to permit features like visitor analytics. There are also some clever ways to emulate much of the functionality and appearance of complex WordPress deployments while remaining safely in the scope of a static site. We'll talk a bit more about that later in the course. But with all that, there will definitely be things you just can't do with a static website. On the other hand, for projects that are a good fit, the payoff can be significant. For instance, instead of having to provision, secure, administrate, and pay for an actual server, whether physical or virtual, besides network connectivity, static sites require nothing more than space on a storage platform. In addition, without layers and layers of server-based services eating up precious memory and network bandwidth, static sites will usually be much faster than comparable workloads running on traditional servers. And when you account for all the built-in infrastructure provided by public cloud platforms like AWS, the resilience, scalability, and security of your site are built in and automatic, all of which can let you sleep happily all night, every night. The decision over how to create your HTML files is of course in your hands. You can certainly handcraft files one at a time in a text editor and upload the whole thing manually. But there are also plenty of frameworks, templating tools, and dedicated static site generators to smooth the process of particularly complicated environments. My own Teach Yourself Data Analytics in 30 Days site is a pretty good example. Basically, this is nothing more than 10 plain text markdown formatted files containing text and some graphs rendered as PNGs. But when I imported those files into the static site framework Hugo, they were transformed into a stable and reasonably attractive site. And by the way, this site is one of many that I host on, you guessed it, Amazon S3. I don't just talk the talk, I walk the walk. How do you choose from among the hundreds of tools that are out there? One helpful resource is this staticsitegenerators.net page that lets you filter through the forest of offerings by license, base language, age, and perhaps most helpful, popularity. Although to be honest, I'm not sure what those star ratings are actually based on. On this page, ranking by stars, the 3 top tools are Gatsby, Hugo, and Jekyll. I happen to use Hugo, but your choice will depend on your particular needs and previous experience. Regardless, though, we'll mostly focus on working at getting your content, no matter how you created it, into a properly configured S3 bucket. We will, however, finish up the course with a quick introduction to working with Hugo. You'll learn how to install a theme, preview a site while it's in development on your own machine, compile a finished site, and finally, to find your way around the Hugo file system. But all that's far off in the distant future. For now, what will the software stack we'll be working with through the main sections of the course look like? We'll begin with some HTML files. Since our site will only exist as an illustration of how to efficiently work with Amazon S3, there's no reason to make anything fancy. We'll create a bucket in S3 and configure it with all the permissions and configurations it'll need to serve our goals. To give our users fast, low-latency access to the site, we'll put it behind a CloudFront distribution. And to force all connections to use SSL TLS encryption, we'll use a certificate from AWS Certificate Manager. Finally, we'll need a DNS domain our users can use to access the site. That will set up in AWS's Route 53. Let's make all that happen.